labor delegates representing 16 million workers gather in New York for the history-making merger of the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations. The merger is the culmination of 20 years of effort. Symbolically, Walter Reuther, CIO President, and George Meany, AF-of-L President, declare the meeting open jointly to thunderous applause. The meeting, however, reaches its climax with the nomination of officers for the new AF-of-L CIO organization, largest in the world. Walter Reuther nominates George Meany as president and is himself named one of the 37 vice presidents. From his Gettysburg office, President Eisenhower is among the first to congratulate the new labor body and to call its attention to the grave responsibilities it faces on the national scene.
In your new national organization, as well as in your many constituent organizations, you have a great opportunity of making your meetings the world's most effective exhibit of democratic processes. In those meetings, the rights of minorities holding differing social, economic, and political views must be scrupulously protected and their views accurately reflected. In this way, as American citizens, you will help the Republic correct the faulty, fortify the good, build stoutly for the future, and reinforce the most cherished freedoms of each individual citizen.
The largest jet-powered helicopter in the world is unveiled by the Air Force, capable of carrying 40 passengers or 3 jeeps. The 77-foot craft weighs 16 tons and is capable of speeds up to 150 miles an hour. Each of the 3-bladed rotors is 82 feet across and is powered by gas turbine engines capable of lifting 7 tons of useful load. Despite its size, the new helicopter giant is more maneuverable than its piston-driven predecessors, and with reduced fuel consumption will have greater range. Air rescue work gets a mighty assist as this flying titan joins the nation's defense forces. Britain's Comet 3 prepares for a record-challenging round-the-world flight from London, a dramatic introduction to the aviation world for the new jet transport, completely redesigned from the earlier models after a series of crashes in which 110 were killed. The new Comet showed its mettle in a 42-hour flight to Australia, 7,000 miles at some 600 miles an hour. American ambassador to Germany, James B. Conant, meets the press to deliver a blunt rejection to Russian proposals to take the city from its present 4-power rule and place it under the control of red-dominated East Germany. He also makes a vigorous protest over the detention by East German police of 2 congressmen. He makes crystal clear that this country will never accede to a change in the Berlin government. The Silver Jubilee celebration of Modern Screen magazine is keynoted by Kirk Douglas, beard and all, who presents the annual award to Rock Hudson, selected as the most popular film actor of the year. It's a happy birthday celebration, especially for the handsome young actor, for this is the 2nd year in a row that Mr. Hudson has been picked by Modern Screen as most popular actor. Top honors for a top star. How now, brown cow, not brown, but orange, an orange cow on Madison Avenue. This strange state of affairs arose as the result of an ad in the papers seeking an orange cow to publicize a brand of orange juice distributed by dairies, so hence the earth-shaking idea. The bathing beauties are on hand for scenic effect, which is lost on the 2 bovine finalists. The bewildered beasties think the stuff in the container is milk. They don't get the connection. It's a grade A puzzle, confusing and not very amusing. The ultimate in do-it-yourself projects from the home workshop of 16-year-old Kurt Golden, Arthur the Robot. The second mechanical man built by the Oakland, California high school youth, Arthur represents all of a month's after-school tinkering. The project paid off. Arthur now handles many of Kurt's chores around the house, while the young genius controls operations from the sidelines. Kurt's next step will be to install radio controls and really take it easy while Arthur works. Oops, an accident. Bad aim or something. But was it an accident? Arthur ain't talking. Seems suspicious, though, when the controls are just about foolproof. But Arthur the robot's a harmless fellow, and uh-oh, here he comes. This is where we go. Pros at work in the Los Angeles Coliseum. Rams versus Colts, with the host gritters, the Rams, getting up steam before 37,000 braving the weather. Tank Younger torpedoes the Colts for the touchdown, and the Western Conference leaders lead. The Baltimore Colts come to life in the fourth quarter when a Ram aerial backfires. Bill Pellington, Colt guard, intercepts and makes like a halfback. The Colts are off to the races. With Shaw holding the reins, the Colts keep moving. Shaw's toss to Mutscheller clicks for yardage as the one-time Notre Dame ace goes to the Los Angeles 7-yard line. 3 plays later, Shaw hands to Amici, Allen the horse of Wisconsin fame. Touchdown for Baltimore. The Rams roar back with Tank Younger carrying everything before him, referee included. The Colts can't stop him, nor stop the Rams from retaining their slim lead in the Western Conference race. Younger scores, Rams win 20-14.
At Brooklyn Navy Yard, the longest, largest, most powerful fighting ship in the world awaits christening. She's the 4th and largest Forrestal-class carrier, and the 5th ship to bear the name Independence. The first was a 10-gun sloop commissioned in 1776. The latest will carry 100 supersonic jets with H-bomb capability. The most powerful radar aboard any carrier helps make her a potent counter-weapon to Russia's submarine fleet. Christened with a proud name by Mrs. Thomas Gates, wife of the Secretary of the Navy, is USS Independence. Over 1,000 feet of matchless fighting machine.
This is the one they're talking about. This is the airborne B-58 Buick. And this is what they're saying.
I like that styling. It's fresh, it's new, it's what I've been hoping for.
They're right. Starting with this new face of fashion Dynastar grille, everything you see announces unmistakably, this is a 1958 Buick. But fresh new styling is only one of the things they're talking about.
There's just one word for Buick's response: terrific.
They're right. Buick's new flight pitch Dynaflow can switch the pitch a million ways. And coupled with it, Buick's fabulous V12,000 engine. You should hear what they say about this.
It's performance. You don't know the meaning of the word till you drive the new Buick.
They're right. Here is the most modern engine it's possible to build for today's highway fuels. And what about that new Miracle Ride?
It's so smooth, you think the whole world's flat.
And the way that Buick handles, you have to feel it to believe it.
This is the one they're talking about, and they're right, all of them. This is the one that looks and feels like flight on wheels. This is the airborne B-58 Buick.
The first major hurricane of the year rips into the coast of the Carolinas, packing winds of more than 100 miles an hour. Sweeping everything before it, the big blow named Connie makes matchwood of beach homes and drives thousands to the interior for shelter. Cars are almost submerged in the rising tides as the twister levels everything in its path. Crop damage may run into the millions. Capricious Connie suddenly veers north and west, heading into the metropolitan areas of big seaboard cities. New York is sideswiped with gales reaching 60 miles an hour, accompanied by a downpour that submerges residential areas with 9 inches in little more than 24 hours. Suburban areas are virtually paralyzed by flooding storm sewers and high tides. As the downpour continues, thousands of homes are flooded and left without power. And as the raging waters race through the streets, they leave the inevitable quagmire of mud. In her reign of terror, Connie carves her tragic niche with a total of 43 dead and damage estimated at $15 million. In Germany, the third worst disaster in United States Air Force history. Twisted, flattened, flame-charred wreckage is all that remains of two flying boxcar transports that crashed in midair and plummeted to earth in flames, carrying 66 aboard to their deaths. The accident occurred during an airborne troop exercise. One plane dropped out of formation with slight engine trouble and, climbing back to position, rammed another. No one escaped. The grim culmination of an instant's miscalculation in midair, flaming death for 66 servicemen. A day of tragedy for American forces in Germany. Week-long demonstrations in South Korea against communist Czech and Polish truce inspectors reach a peak of violence at Incheon, with United States troops holding a firm line against the mob. The demonstrations, in which thousands have taken part, are in support of Syngman Rhee's ultimatum, demanding that the East European Armistice Commission members leave the country. A minimum of violence was used in repelling the mob attacks, but an estimated 44 Americans and over 100 demonstrators were injured. On the 8th day, President Rhee yielded to America's firm support of the armistice agreement, whose terms guarantee the truce inspectors' safety. Korean anger against the Reds continues, but the threat of violence has receded after the attempted use of mob rule to coerce American policy resulted in the use of tear gas by American troops against the people of an ally. This is Homecoming, the end of a saga of imprisonment and torture for 11 American flyers who endured the barbarity of a ruthless enemy for 30 long months. But at Travis Air Force Base, brainwashing is momentarily forgotten as Colonel Arnold is embraced by relatives. There's a tragic homecoming for one member of the group, Daniel Schmidt, whose wife remarried during his imprisonment. Happier is the lot of Major Balmer, still on crutches, surrounded by friends and relatives. Safe at last, but Americans will long remember their inhuman treatment. Flags are flying, the kids are marching. Dinah Shore is smiling on Derby Day in Akron, Ohio. This is the day of the Soapbox Derby, dedicated to the youth of America. Winners of local contests that come from many states, from Canada and even Germany, to race their homemade speedsters down the 975-foot incline at Derby Downs. First prize is a $5,000 college scholarship, as if they could forget. Ready for the first heat. Gravity provides the power, but youthful skill and enthusiasm does the rest, as heat after heat gets away before the crowds jamming the grandstands. Derby Downs is used only this one day a year, but what a day. One by one, the heats are run. Victory for some and another heat, while for most the disappointment of defeat. But all is forgotten as the final heat is run, and there's the winner on the left, a 6-foot, 14-year-old Richard Rohrer of Rochester, New York. Dick will use his scholarship to study medicine. He'll remember Derby Day. Soldiers Field, Chicago, where 75,000 sports fans are in for their thrills worth of football. Pros versus college all-stars. The 22nd in this series of Midsummer Gridiron Classics. Pros on the move. From the one, Radaman of the Cleveland Browns scores to put his team out front. Aerial warfare is waged, Radaman doing the passing, with Lavelli on the receiving end, as the Browns, world champs, again gather momentum. Skirting the all-star flank, Renfro goes 18 yards. That's all it takes for another Brown tally. Trailing by 4, the Collegians get going. Guglielmi tosses to Dupre for a gain of 20 yards. Ralph Guglielmi, Notre Dame passing ace, connects again, this time to Magel of Rice. Keep passing, it works. Guglielmi to Hare in the end zone, and the All-Stars are ahead. But not for long. Passing is a Brown fancy, too. Radaman heaves to Renfro for a gain of 42 big yards. Radaman to Renfro, the right combination for the cash and carry Gritters. Radaman to Renfro for the TD, and the Browns are out front at halftime. Late in the game, break for the All-Stars. Bettis intercepts, and the college boys are off and running. Off to victory for the first time in 5 years against the pros. Who's passing? Guglielmi of Notre Dame, spotting his man with bullseye precision right in the shadow of the goal line. Mel Triplett bangs across, and the All-Stars win it 30-27. During an aerial tour of the devastated Northeast, President Eisenhower, shocked at the havoc, follows the path of destruction in the country's worst flood. And of ruin, there is plenty for the president to see. For what was once one of the nation's most prosperous regions, a series of small industrial towns, are now sodden heaps of wreckage. These were once thriving manufacturing communities, whose products were the handiwork of Yankee craftsmen. Now their remains stand under the watchful eyes of National Guardsmen on the lookout for prowlers and looters. For the government and all relief agencies have taken over, and an attempt is made to assess the damage toll that already has reached into the billions. The immediate needs food, medical attention to guard against the grim specter of disease. Already $75 million in federal funds is being made available for the most pressing relief work, with more to be voted by Congress as necessary. The president has urgently asked all Americans to aid their stricken fellow citizens. Meanwhile, with characteristic courage, the digging out begins for the long pull back. Mountains of debris must be removed and communications restored, but come back it will, for this is one of the cradles of America's greatness. North Africa is aflame with civil war, which from day to day grows in intensity. The tide of battle shifts from Algeria to Morocco almost hourly. As completely aroused nationalist natives take on the full military might of France. Hit-and-run raids leave villages in flames, often with most of their inhabitants massacred. All roads are under guard and barricaded, passable only to the French military. Even as talks between Arab leaders and the French take place, the unbridled fury of the guerrilla warfare continues. With 2.5 divisions deployed and French reservists called up, the rebels continue to fight, but at a cost. Already 1,700 are dead. Not even hospitals are spared in the savage struggle. As for the non-combatants, they, as always, are the pawns in a rebellion whose seeds are sown deeply. A crucial day for the unity of Western Europe approaches as elections come due in the Saar to determine the future of this highly industrialized region, long a source of friction between France and Germany. Political warfare is at a high pitch, a battle to sway the decision of the electorate on approval or rejection of the Franco-German treaty, Europeanizing the industrial heartland of the continent by giving equal economic rights to both nations. Saar Premier Joseph Hoffman, a pro-French leader, has had many rallies broken up by violence, organized, he charges, by German political factions. The treaty rousing these partisan passions was the price of French consent to a general German peace treaty and admission to NATO. Its rejection by the voters of the Saar will shake the unity of NATO to its very core and cast the future of the Western Alliance itself into doubt. As a byproduct of the Northeast floods, 24 passengers narrowly escaped death in the swollen Concord River as a Boston to Montreal train crashes into a tank car which had become detached from a freight train. The tank car is hurled into the river, while the cars of the passenger train hang precariously to the edge of the trestle. A car catching the edge of the embankment saves the whole train from the river plunge. Meet the Thing, as the Marines call their newest tank destroyer, a radical vehicle to carry out radical battlefield tactics. It packs 606mm recoilless rifles instead of the usual big artillery piece. Each rifle is aimed by a 50 caliber spotting machine gun. The Thing is designed to move in a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit, hit and run. The Defense Department films show its firepower. Bad news for tanks.
Beauty doesn't always mean quality. That's true of women and certainly true of cars. Looks can be deceiving. But here's one car that has as much quality as it has beauty. The magnificent new 58 DeSoto. It has what we call the look and feel of the future. The name DeSoto has stood for quality for a long time. Quality all the way. Not only in the big things like the newly designed engine and torsion air ride, push-button driving, and new styling. But DeSoto quality shows up in details, too.
Such things as DeSoto door handles and beautiful new upholsteries are made with the same high standards in materials and craftsmanship.
DeSoto looks big on the outside and is big on the inside. Just look how roomy this is. Plenty of headroom and plenty of legroom.
So whatever DeSoto you choose, you can be certain of the finest in quality, roominess, and driving comfort.
Drive it yourself, and you'll see what we mean when we say the 58 DeSoto has the look and feel of the future.
Citizens of the new state of Ghana gather for the celebration marking their Day of Freedom from colonialism. What was once the Gold Coast, a British colony, now becomes an independent Commonwealth. Vice President and Mrs. Nixon represent the United States at the three-day festivities. Native dances and games mark an event of historic importance since Ghana becomes the first Negro colony in Africa to gain its freedom. Premier Kwame Nkrumah chats with Representative Adam Clayton Powell of the U.S. as Ghana's new army passes in review before the American-educated Premier and Deputy Secretary Ralph Bunche of the United Nations. Another feature of the occasion is a beauty contest in which the fairest of the land compete. And here is Miss Ghana herself, first queen of a brand new republic. The Navy gasoline tanker Mission, cut squarely in two, lies in shallow water in the Delaware following a collision with a freighter and an ensuing explosion, which could be heard in Maryland 40 miles away. At the time these pictures were made, 9 of the crew members of the tanker, including its captain, were missing. The freighter, the Elna II of Liberian registry, also caught fire but was beached and the flames brought under control. Some of the crew, badly injured and burned in the explosion, are removed by the Coast Guard Army engineer tugs for treatment ashore. The stretch of river known as the Graveyard of Ships takes yet another toll. The heir apparent to Monaco, little Princess Caroline Louise makes her entry into the church, as she is formally christened by the Bishop of Monaco while held in the arms of her godmother, Margaret Davis. Present is her godfather, Hungarian Prince Festetics. The solemn ceremony is witnessed by a capacity crowd which throngs the cathedral and joins in the ritual. The proud parents, Prince Renier and former film star Grace Kelly, have fulfilled the fondest hopes of the tiny principality. Fun-making and fantasy rule the city as New Orleans celebrates Mardi Gras. The famous, fabulous Rex Parade is one of the high points of the gaiety with which the Crescent traditionally observes the carnival, the last fling of merrymaking before the 40 days of Lent. And as in years past, they celebrate here with a flair practically unique in these United States. Lavish preparation and lusty participation is the formula for Mardi Gras.
Well, the first step is that button N, easy way to start. Next step, the button D, another simple part. Then slide away automatically, almost imperceptibly. You just lean back and turn that wheel. The button drives out of the beat. For reverse, touch the button R. Oh, which button part? Best by far. Button 1, that's for power and low. Button 2 takes you downhill slow. Well, that's it, folks. That's all there is to it. That's push button drive, and that's how you do it.
As 1958 began, America sent aloft its first Earth satellite, the Explorer, drawing abreast of Soviet science with 3 more successful launchings during the year. Then, in December, an Atlas ballistic missile guided itself into orbit to become by far the biggest artificial moon. Even more impressive, it carried a tape recording broadcasting to the world the President's message of peace. Man was pushing back frontiers on Earth as well. The atomic submarine Nautilus cruised under the Arctic ice and the North Pole itself. An historic underwater voyage from Hawaii to England. Her sister sub, the Skate, also cruised under the pole, while the nuclear Seawolf set a 60-day underwater endurance record. But Commander Anderson and his men of the Nautilus took first honors for pioneering what may be a key trade lane of the future, demonstrating the awesome power of the nuclear submarine and dramatically directing attention to the strategic Northlands. Fittingly, in that same year, 1958, Alaska finally won its long-sought statehood. Alaskans celebrated with an enthusiasm recalling sourdough days. A new state, twice as large as Texas, joined the Union. And a bright new star was added to the 48th. Vice President and Mrs. Nixon toured South America and encountered rabid anti-Americanism, touched off by political ferment and economic troubles. Caracas mobs attacked Mr. Nixon in his car in a shocking climax to his tour. Earlier, communist-led mobs in Peru had stoned the Vice President. Perhaps the prime candidate for Man of the Year was Charles de Gaulle. He returned to the premiership after France came to the brink of civil war when army forces and rightist settlers in strife-torn Algeria seized control and repudiated the Paris government. Given sweeping powers, the general decreed a vacation from politics for France while he prepared a new constitution. The Fifth Republic came into being with an overwhelming Gaullist majority in the new National Assembly. Once again, Charles de Gaulle was his nation's man of destiny. Brussels Fair was a contest for international prestige, and the graceful, airy United States Pavilion with its cheerful showcasing of America's everyday life stood in favorable contrast to the looming Soviet exhibition hall. America won a triumph on the cultural front, but the Kremlin in 1958 took the initiative in the global power struggle. Khrushchev's wooing of Gamal Abdel Nasser brought new upheavals in the Middle East. Strengthened by Soviet arms and economic aid, Nasser began the year by joining Egypt and Syria into the new United Arab Republic. Pan-Arabism was on the march. Nasser was his prophet, and there was dire peril for friends of the West, such as King Faisal of Iraq and his uncle Prince Abdul Ilah, whose attempted united front with Hussein of Jordan was ended by an army-led revolt in Iraq. Faisal, his uncle, and Premier Nouri Es-Said, three of Nasser's staunchest foes, were slain in a wave of shocking violence. Neighboring Lebanon, torn by Nasser-incited rebellion, called for aid, and United States Marines landed near Beirut. The landings were only a few hours by air from Soviet frontiers. A possible red attack was the calculated risk of this bold response to Lebanon's call for help. The Marines, by their very presence, were a stabilizing force. The government restored order so that free elections could be held. The crisis passed, and Russia's denunciations and demands for a summit meeting abruptly faded as Red China provoked a new crisis in the Strait of Formosa. Communist guns launched a massive barrage against the Quemoy Island group, nationalist islands barely 3 miles offshore. 50,000 shells landed in one day, beginning a rain of fire intended to cut off supply shipments. To counter the blockade by barrage and the threat of invasion, the U.S. 7th Fleet was reinforced. The mightiest naval force ever assembled, it shepherded Chinese supply convoys to the edge of territorial waters. At first, landing craft were unable to pierce the curtain of fire, but as stockpiled food and supplies ran dangerously low, more and more convoys and airlifts got through. The balance shifted. Red gunfire grew sporadic, and the Cold War pressure again shifted abruptly. Now to West Berlin, that enclave of freedom 110 miles behind the Iron Curtain. The Free City was a showcase for democracy and capitalism. Its obvious prosperity in two-pointed contrast to the regimentation and shabby poverty of the Soviet Hill sector. Red militiamen drilled amid the rubble of World War II. Much of East Berlin is still unreconstructed after more than a decade. Under Den Linden, pre-war Avenue of Elegance typified East Berlin's plight, as Russia demanded that Berlin be neutralized and made free of four-power control. The Soviet flag no longer flew before the Allied Kommandatura as Khrushchev's 6-month deadline drew near. The stage was set for another Berlin blockade, or worse, in a bold Soviet gambit threatening the entire balance of power on the continent. The death of Pope Pius, shown with Cardinal Spellman in some of the last films of the Pontiff, stilled one of the world's great voices for humanity. In an age of crisis, he had been among the champions of human rights and the cause of peace. The morning of 500 million Catholics for the deceased pontiff was followed by keen anticipation as the College of Cardinals met to choose Pius's successor. He was Angelo Cardinal Roncalli, who assumed the triple crown of Pope John the 23rd, a weighty burden in time of continuing peril to the hopes of all mankind for freedom and peace.